Welcome, everyone. This is the TPA's third Thursday at 2 training series, our T5 series. Today, February 17th, we're going to cover updates to our program guide. This is really kind of our playbook, our manual on how the PACE program works in the state and how we administer it. So let's get right to it. Oops. There we go, a little too fast. I'm Doug Taylor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Texas PACE Authority. Prior to my service here with TPA, I managed a state office that did public sector energy efficiency and engineering projects for about 20 years. Before that, in the commercial real estate business, so PACE really kind of ties those two backgrounds together. And so for today's webinar, everyone is going to be muted and your video is disabled to save bandwidth. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A, a chat, and a raise hand. Please use the Q&A, and that will save the questions that you have that may come up throughout the webinar, and we should have time at the end to address those. But please use the Q&A and not the chat. Also, if you attend today, you'll receive a survey afterwards with also a PDH certificate. If you'd like that, this can serve as an hour of professional development hours if you're an engineer or other professional discipline. And the attendees today, if you're an attendee, you'll get a copy of the slide deck. So pay attention, I guess, to the webinar, and don't worry about furiously trying to take notes. You will get a copy of this. And like all of our T5 webinars, this recording will be available on TPA's website later, as well as our YouTube channel. So if you have colleagues that weren't able to join us live today, there will be an opportunity for them to view this later. So as I mentioned, T5s, these are a series of webinars we started back in April of 2020, covering a variety of different aspects of PACE and PACE administration. The last one we did was a recap last month. 2021 was a really great year, coming off of 2020, a COVID year, which still surprisingly was a pretty good year. And all of these are listed on our website. They're archived here and can be viewed later. So the agenda for today, looking at the folks who had registered, I saw a number of familiar names, faces, and companies. But then I saw an equal number of those I was not familiar with. So I'm going to spend a little time on providing a PACE market update, which will be news to many of the folks on the webinar today, and maybe a review for some of you as well. Talking about then the Texas PACE Act and how we're implementing that, and the need for the toolkit that's been developed, as well as a program guide. Then I'm going to cover some next immediate steps you can expect, cover a few resources, and then I think at the end we'll have time to answer any questions that arise during the webinar. So please go ahead and put those in the Q&A box. So with that, I'm going to start, but I'm also going to turn off my video. Oops, sorry. And preserve a little bandwidth on my side if I can do that. So first of all, the Texas PACE market update. The market continues to expand. These are the regions, the different cities and counties that have adopted PACE. We serve 72 of them now. Most recently, the city of Red Oak, that's not even on the map yet, adopted PACE and brought us in to run it for them on Tuesday of this week. Dallas County is also a new addition. They have brought us in to run the PACE program. They have a few more steps to take to formally create their program and stand it up. So we're working there as well. But as we see the map here, the blue areas represent now over 60% of the population that's covered by a PACE region, either a city boundary or a county boundary, and the map is filling in. So more and more interest in PACE as things go along, as we have more projects to talk about, as different cities are hearing from their counterparts from an economic development perspective, how PACE is beneficial and how it can serve a number of different needs. So this trend certainly continues. In our role, the Texas PACE Authority, we really serve in this kind of governmental outsourced mode where once a city or a county, which are authorized in state law to create PACE programs decide they want to do that, they then have figured out that they really don't want to create new PACE departments to operate the program. So they hire us and we run that program for them. So we really serve this governmental function in an outsourced manner. The Texas PACE Authority, we are a nonprofit. We're the only nonprofit PACE administrator operating in the state of Texas. We really serve that public purpose. We have no other role in the projects other than providing oversight on behalf of our city and county clients. And we don't do any other business. This is all we do. There are some PACE administrators around the country that may provide financing, may sell software, may do bond advisory, things like that. All we do is administer PACE programs. So that's our specialty. And I always, view our role as we really serve this sort of function like a referee on a playing field. The cities and counties, once they've adopted the program, set the rules for the players. The players are the property owners, the capital providers, and the service providers. And our job is to make sure that all of the projects that move forward and close utilizing PACE meet those requirements. So that's our role. If you look at the progress and really kind of the numbers and adoption of PACE by projects, over 190 million of investment to date through PACE. And it's really kind of hockey stick growth from 2015 when there wasn't a project yet to 2021 when we're up to $190 million. It's been pretty steady even during the COVID year in 2020. The commercial and retail sector represent the most projects, followed by hospitality, lodging, and then commercial office space. And if you look at the types of things that have been financed, about half of them are energy efficiency, about a third of them are water conservation, and then 12% distributed energy, pretty much all of that solar photovoltaic rooftop type systems. And the problem that PACE was designed to help resolve is this one. And that is that business owners, property owners know that they can save money over the long haul if they make investments in higher efficiency energy and water systems to their properties. But these can be expensive. These upgrades can be expensive, and they have a lot of competing priorities for their budgets. So given the high upfront costs and all the other expenses, either the projects don't get done or they get kicked down the road to where they have to be replaced on an emergency basis, the next point. And that's a challenge because, chillers don't go out in December. Typically, they go out in July. So you may wind up, with a piece of equipment you would not have specified if it was not done on an emergency basis. You wind up doing projects not in an integrated fashion, stepping back, really looking holistically at what the building might need. You're doing it more on a piecemeal basis. And so the systems become sub-optimized, and that costs the operator, the owners, unnecessary utility expense. That can create comfort issues, lower building performance, a lot of things like that, sort of incidentally. The other is on new construction, and PACE can be used for new construction of a developed lot. This is where if a new property is going above minimum code, that might qualify the project for PACE. In the case of new construction, there's always challenges with budgets, again, construction budgets. And there's a process called value engineering, which basically says, okay, we specified this, the budget can't afford it. So now what do? Well, we take a lower performing HVAC system, for example. And so things that are behind the walls that are less visible, which are the MEP systems, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, are usually those that get value engineered out, at least the higher efficiency systems. So those decisions made at the front end can really, haunt the property through its life, which might be 50, 60, 100 years. So again, PACE can help address this issue on the front end of new construction. And so PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy, of course, is what it stands for, providing long-term, low-cost, 100% funding for certain energy efficiency, water conservation, and distributed energy projects. This is private financing, We've had questions, and often it's confused because local governments are involved. Is this government funding? No, it's not. It is private financing, but it's secured by a special property assessment that is authorized by the local government, and that remains in place over the financing term or the useful life of the improvement. So that provides the assurance, the security for a lender to provide a much longer loan with more favorable terms than a standard equipment loan. PACE is authorized under state law, the Local Government Code, Chapter 399. It's enabled local government by local government. We've seen that, as I mentioned, with 72 now that we serve. Voluntary and open market, meaning there is no prescribed list of vendors, lenders, capital providers, engineers that have to be used. Anyone can be used. There are certain sort of minimum criteria for qualifications, and any commercial property within those PACE regions is potentially eligible. So voluntary and open market is really a key feature of the Texas program. The types of properties that are eligible: commercial properties. This includes nonprofits. The very first PACE project in the state was at a house of worship. Multifamily units, 5 units or more, and any sort of industrial, manufacturing, or agricultural properties are also eligible. About the only thing that's not is single family residential or residential up to 4 units. The types of projects that are eligible: if it is a project that reduces energy or water usage or generates energy on site, then potentially that is a project that could be PACE financeable. Some examples here on the energy side and on the water side. I won't read through those, but you can see it's a host of things as you would expect: HVAC, lighting, controls, renewable energy systems, water conservation, all those types of things. So let's talk about the Texas PACE Act and how that was implemented. So when the Texas PACE Act was passed by the legislature, like many laws that are passed by the legislature, they provide authorization. They are deliberately very general. If a law or a statute or a piece of legislation becomes too specific and you get something wrong, then you have to wait 2 years at least until the legislature reconvenes to make technical corrections. So by design, most statutes are general. So they provide authority, they outline what's now authorized under state law, and then typically a state agency, or usually a state agency, is assigned with developing rules that are a second level, more specific on how really to kind of operationalize that law. In the case of the Texas PACE Act, though, that rule piece was not part of it. Essentially, the authority was created, and cities and counties were given the option to create PACE programs. The challenge with that in Texas is we have 1,200 cities, 254 counties. So there could have been almost 1,500 different interpretations of that state law and how it was to be operationalized. So into that void, these group called Keeping stepped in and said, we need to provide some guidance. There's no reason that cities and counties should be forced to figure this out on their own. And certainly, if you're a property owner with properties in multiple jurisdictions, or a capital provider wanting to work across the state, or a contractor wanting to work across the state, there's no reason you should have to learn 1,500 different ways of doing business. So this tool called PACE in a Box was created, and the idea is that this was a set of uniform standards that were consistent with the statute, the PACE Act, that could be used throughout the state and would not have to be reinvented and started from scratch. So that really kind of replaced that rule piece. And then moving on to the guidelines, PACE, and any PACE administrator can develop its own guidelines, and that's really kind of a next level of detail. How they actually interface with owners. That's even kind of a level beyond that. And so we have developed guidelines, program guidelines, for how we operate the PACE programs for our city and county clients. So that's really how the PACE Act was implemented and why this PACE in a box was necessary and is valuable, and why guidelines are necessary and valuable. So that's kind of how we got here. So let's talk about some updates that have been made recently to the PACE in a Box toolkit. There were 5 different working groups that contributed to the PACE in a Box effort. This was all coordinated again by Keeping Pace in Texas. And again, this was kind of a proxy, if you will, for what's typically administrative rules. And 2 of the working groups were focused, one on underwriting standards for projects, and another was focused on technical standards. And from the outset, we assumed that as the market matured, there would be a need for changes and updates to these standards, and that indeed has played out. So in 2021, there were some updates to each of these areas, and we now are moving forward with incorporating those changes into our program guidelines. So let's look at those. First of all, January 2021, the underwriting standards group of Keeping Pace in Texas looked into 3 different areas: the loan to assess value, the intent and refinance, and then also into undeveloped lots, and provided clarity on how this should be interpreted. The idea again here is consensus, uniformity across the state, and how PACE programs are operated. And we're going to go into these a little bit more, but the loan to assess value update, that essentially raised the value. It has been 20% historically. The recommendation here is that should be 25%. The loan is a comparison to the appraised value of the property. The intent and refinance update, the changes there are that in the case of a refinance or refunding, there has to be clear intent shown prior to the project to make it PACE eligible. So if it is, for instance, a LEED building or LEED standard building that is above code, and the owner has, is making, or indicating intent to make that property, more energy or water efficient than is required. So that could satisfy the intent issue. And then also on refinancing, what's a reasonable look back period? So that was established at 24 months after the project's completed. So these things were clarified. And then on undeveloped lots, there is a clear prohibition in the PACE Act that says that PACE can't be used for undeveloped lots or lots undergoing development at the time of the assessment. But there are situations where maybe there is a structure that is on the lot already, and it's been cleared to make way for a new project. And does that then qualify the lot? So issues like this were worked out. Again, these were things that back in 2015, when the first guidance came out, weren't anticipated. But as the markets matured, these guidelines have been changed and updated. And then in October of last year, the technical standards manual was updated as well to take into account a number of changes that were needed. And back in August of last year, we hosted one of our T5 webinars. Was some of the participants from the people that were involved in putting together the technical standards update to describe all of those changes. So not only is the manual available in full, but there is a webinar kind of like this one that was done back in August that goes through the details and the thinking behind those technical standards. One of the new tools that Keeping Pace in Texas is now offering or has available is what's called this PACE ITPR workbook. There's been a challenge where when an ITPR, that's an independent third-party reviewer, is doing a review of a project, different engineers have different ways of doing this. Spreadsheets, other tools, they might be constructed a little bit differently. And so when you're reviewing these, they aren't always consistent in sort of the layout. And so the idea here is KPT wanted to provide sort of a common tool that reviewers could use, engineers could use in putting projects together, and it would be easier and more efficient to review them. So this ITPR workbook, which is free, downloadable, It is an Excel-based tool, so very, very easy to use and used by anyone. Really has a couple of key features. One, if you look at the color coding, there are yellow cells that are the required input cells, gray cells are locked, and so they're calculated, and then blue cells are informational. So by putting in certain variables, it will calculate for you if a project meets these requirements. So they have to, as stated here in the first paragraph there, you see in the workbook, they have to achieve a SIR, a savings to investment ratio, equal to or greater than 1, and they can't exceed the maximum LTV now of 25%. So it'll calculate all that for you. Looking at the project spreadsheet a little bit, this is the first tab. This is the top of it, project details, different eligible measures. Those are drop downs, and then you can put the description. Moving down to the middle, the same input worksheet. You can put in the utility information there. At the bottom, the financial information, the cost, the payback, etc. And moving down to the bottom, loan savings, if any other financial considerations are part of the project, those can be captured there. And then the calculation side, the total savings of the assessment term, those gray cells are automatically calculated, and you can compare and see which portion of the savings are coming from utility and operating costs and which are financial savings. So again, kind of a provided tool for consistency, and we certainly encourage all project stakeholders to use this tool. The workbook itself has some calculators that are behind the scenes built in. These are default values, but these can be adjusted and depending on the project. And then we also have by reference in the tool different standard eligible measures that we typically see in PACE projects and sort of higher level categories. And then the last thing is useful life references. Two pieces of information here. One from the State Energy Conservation Office's Lone Star program, and then also from the ASHRAE handbook. So if the question arises, what's the expected useful life of a rooftop unit, you have a point of reference here. So with those updates to PACE in a box, that triggered some needed updates to TPA's program guide. The last version and the version you'll see on the website today, if you go there, is this version 3 that was published in 2018. Still, quite a bit of it is relative and accurate today, but there's also some things that needed to be updated. And so that's what we've taken on now. The existing program guide, we looked at it this way. There are some things that really don't change, they're constant. There's others that need to be changed, and there's some that are no longer relevant. So if you think of a stoplight, the things that are green highlighted here are generally okay and sort of long-lived and don't change a lot. So some rewording, but some things, but really no major changes there. The PACE project process, those are some things that needed some real retooling based on the guidance and updates from keeping PACE in Texas. And then anything red is, probably doesn't need to be there, is no longer relevant. So moving on through it, how PACE projects are reviewed, a lot of changes here, and they're mirroring the Keeping PACE in Texas underwriting and technical standards as published. At Texas PACE Authority, we adopt and use the PACE in a box tools and guidelines as published without changes or alterations. We think that is the only way to do it to provide consistency statewide. And so our program guide mirrors those standards. The administration side, again, not a lot of changes there. There are significant changes to the resources that are there. And then we had in the existing program guide almost a reprint of certain sections of the past technical guidelines. And I know this created some confusion because I've had these questions. People would ask, do we use your guidelines or do we use the technical standards? And while they should be the same, just the layout is not exactly the same. So that presented some confusion. So we're removing that section completely, that Appendix A. And instead, we're adopting by reference the Keeping Pace in Texas technical standards as published in October of last year. There will be links that are provided, you'll see in the program guide back to those, but we won't be reprinting those to avoid confusion. There's also a number of different protocols outlined for doing these technical assessments that seem to make sense at the time, but don't any longer. So again, we're adopting by reference all of the KPT technical standards. And then we also had an Appendix B where we had a number of static forms that were listed informationally that were important, but those forms change. And we didn't want to go back in and update the program guide each time there was a tweak to a form. So that section's going away as well. And there will be links in the program guide, you'll see, back to the forms. We'll keep the forms updated, and that's just a better way of doing it. So the program guide before was 54 pages. A lot of that, again, was repeat of technical standards, forms, and other things that exist in other places. So one of the objectives was to sort of, knock this down to a smaller document so that someone opening it for the first time wouldn't say, oh my gosh, I've got to read 54 pages to figure out how this program works. And I think we've done that. So the updated program guide is going to look like this, and it will be published, and we'll get to that in a second. But basically the layout and the table of contents will be like this. We'll have the overview, section 1, section 2, listing of all the statutory and programmatic requirements that are key and important to the program. Section 3 is the process, and this is something that we knew we can improve upon because our existing guidance had a lot of the same information, but not so much a roadmap and step by step. And so we've presented this in a different way, looking at project eligibility, scope, capital providers, determining other parties to the project, mortgage holder consent, if applicable, third-party review, closing, construction, installation verification, and then benchmarking and measuring savings at the end. So it's more of a logical flow than maybe the way it was presented before. And then on the review side, section 4, the review process, the technical review, the third-party reviewer that's required, the underwriting review, and then the key metrics that have all been updated. Program administration, again, not a lot of this has changed because so much of this is in the statute. And again, instead of having pages of forms and documents in a static form, resources and links are provided at the end. And we have been able to knock this from 54 pages down to 18, which we think is less intimidating if you're looking at this for the first time, and hopefully more understandable and more approachable. Some other things we've done is the narrative is all good and gives you clear guidance on where to turn and what to do, but oftentimes people are more think in more pictures, and this could be useful as well. So we've interspersed some infographics into the guide as well. On the technical review side, looking at those different aspects of the initial technical review, the third-party reviewer, and underwriting, and then really again kind of that step-by-step process to make it clearer to new parties exactly how the process will work. So the next steps, we are publishing the updated program guide. This is version 4. This should be targeting March 1st, but it will be March, first part of March. Again, it will involve not only the narrative updates, but also the kind of the more visual and graphics that make it more user-friendlier to folks that are unfamiliar with the program. The website, our website, those links all updated. New forms will be updated. And then to follow on with this, we're going to be providing an online training where if you are a stakeholder, if you're a contractor, a service provider of any type, you can go online and at your own pace, go through a training sequence, 3 parts. Each part will have a test. And if you score at least a minimum score to pass that, you can be listed on our website then as a PACE trained service provider. So that's coming as well now that the ink is dry on the program guide. So look for that. So different resources available to you. Our main website, if you haven't been there already, TexasPaceAuthority.com. The existing program guide is there. That's what you'll see if you go to the program guide. Once the new one is published, it will be linked there. Events and training, webinars like we're doing today, as well as any follow-on events, the online training will be listed there. Case studies, we have historically done case studies on certain projects, but not all of them. We're building out that inventory and that library of case studies to provide more examples of the projects that have closed around the state. And then again, key, if you're on the webinar today, you're probably an interested stakeholder, and the service provider directory is there. A few months ago, it was reformatted in a way that's searchable by capital provider, engineering, service providers, et cetera. And again, that's a resource for all parties, including owners. We make it clear that by being listed there, that's not an endorsement. This is an information resource for different parties looking at PACE projects. So Q&A, I see a few questions have come in. I'm going to take a look and see what's here now. Bear with me while I read these and we'll react. So our project's a nonprofit. We're waiting on the city of Plano to give permit for land development, net zero goal with geothermal, solar panels, et cetera. Will we be eligible for the PACE program? So it sounds like the project, as described, would qualify. The city of Plano does not yet have a PACE program established. So there's a process, a two-step process that the city would need to go through to establish the PACE program. Plano's in Collin County. Collin County has not adopted PACE at the county level. So the project sounds like it probably would be eligible, but I guess the pre-qualifier for that is the city of Plano or Collin County would have to have a PACE program established first. The next question, shed light on funding availability for new grassroots community service houses of worship buildings. Let's see, that would incorporate energy efficiency measures, renewable energy use, et cetera, et cetera. Since no retrofits are involved, what's the process for evaluating or funding such project? Okay, so for new construction, what we do is we assume that you're going to have to construct at least to minimum applicable codes. And today, statewide, the minimum applicable energy code is the 2015 International Energy Conservation Code. That's adopted through a rulemaking, through a deliberate process that the State Energy Conservation Office oversees. So what we do is we look at that as the baseline. So clearly there's no building there yet because it's a new building. And if your project, if your scope and your specifications for equipment exceed that minimum code, that 2015 IECC, by at least 5%, that's the standard that we look at, then that qualifies those measures for PACE. So that's the way we look at new projects. Another key consideration, and I mentioned this already, is that since PACE can't be used for undeveloped lots, there would need to have been prior development or something on the parcel, on the lot, that makes it considered developed. Usually what we'll see is a record of some type through the Essential Appraisal District that will show a structure that was there at one time. Maybe it's been removed. So there's a way to do that. But for new construction, since there is no prior equipment necessarily, we use the minimum energy code as the baseline. Next question I see is, are there PACE programs utilizing public funds or government grants in Texas? If there are, how's the relationship with TPA programs managed? There are no PACE programs that use government funds or government grants or public funds. PACE really, at its essence is sort of a conduit to allow private capital to match up with private projects, but in a much longer term than normally would be in a financing arrangement. So it's a private to private transaction facilitated through a public process, but no public funds are used. If there are funds that are available, and I'm thinking in the case of like an owner that might qualify for tax credits, other things like that that are governmental in nature, those are financial benefits or financial savings that are caused by the project or made eligible by the project that could be counted into the savings to investment ratio calculation. So on the savings side of that, we're obviously looking at what would the energy or water or utility savings be, or the avoided costs. But then also, if the project that's being installed qualifies for grants, for rebates, things of that nature, essentially cash to the owner caused by the project, then that cash can also be considered on the savings side in that calculation. And we have seen in several projects, one in particular that comes to mind, where it was a commercial project, a feed store in a town outside of Austin, that all they were really interested in doing was covering the roof with solar, with photovoltaics. So they used PACE, but they also secured a USDA grant to cover part of the costs, and then also they used utility incentives from Encore, the electric provider, to buy down the cost of the project as well. And then they financed the balance through PACE. So that's sort of a perfect match of taking all these available sources and putting them toward one project. Another question I see here: is there a methodology for new but tested efficiency technologies to be utilized in Texas PACE? Essentially, if it is a commercially available technology, if it's something you could place an order for, something that is not experimental, it's not on a lab bench, and the key to it also is we have there's a review done by a Texas licensed PE. So they have to sign off and say, yes, we believe this technology will deliver the savings that are being claimed and are part of the PACE project. And so it's really ultimately up to that professional engineer to understand, how the technology works, how confident they are in not only the savings, but the longevity. So that's really kind of a key control is the professional engineering community to kind of validate anything that maybe, is less familiar. But there's no specified list of, technologies that are or are not available. It's kind of, again, back to the high level qualification. If it can, save energy, water, or produce power on the customer side of the meter, then that's potentially eligible. Another question I see, how can in this case Plano, going back to the Plano question, how can they get into the program? Well, it's up to the city council, the mayor, to consider this. Again, we have now 72 jurisdictions across the state, cities and counties that have adopted PACE. The documents, the resolutions, everything required to create a local PACE program are available. A city or a county anywhere would not have to do this on their own. This is available to them. We have the documents, form documents that meet all the requirements under state law. It's a matter of, usually a property owner or someone within the community, that would approach the county judge or the mayor or the city council member and say, this is a tool we'd like to use, but it requires you, the city, or you, the county, to create it first. And once you do, then we can access it and allow us to move our project forward. So normally that's how it happens. A developer, has a project in mind, or a lender is working with a developer, and they approach the city or the county to move forward on those actions. Another question, let's see. Some jurisdictions, this is a good one. Some jurisdictions have already adopted the 2021 IECC, and SECO is completing its review now of statewide adoption. How do these affect the baseline? So the baseline in a new construction situation is, at a minimum, the 2015 IECC, which is the last action SECO has taken, or whatever is locally applicable. So if the jurisdiction has adopted 2021 IECC already, it's going to be a higher bar. So going 5% above 2021 is a higher bar than going 5% above 2015 IECC. Can still be done, but yeah, we again lacking a baseline in a new construction scenario, the locally applicable code, or if there is not one, or if it is lower, or hasn't been updated to at least 2015, the 2015 IECC is the baseline. Let's see. Another one, I'd like to confirm I heard it correctly. An update to the guidelines include a 24-month look-back period and SIR requirement. Yes, there can be a 24-month look-back after construction is completed, assuming the project meets all other PACE-related qualifications and that intent is demonstrated. The key to this, and this is a requirement in state law, is that the project must be intended to save energy or water. What we have seen to support intent is either, they have, again, LEED's a perfect example. The owner voluntarily has specified, some LEED standard for construction, and that is above minimum code, and that can satisfy the intent question. Or also, if they have applied for and secured utility incentives. Utility incentives, again, are above energy or water code minimums, and so that can serve to support the intent question as well. So yes, that's part of the underwriting guidelines that were updated. And then the SIR requirement is unchanged. SIR, savings to investment ratio, equal to or greater than 1 over the life of the project is still the standard. Those are the questions I'm seeing now. And I do see another thing that came in through chat. Utility incentives are available for qualifying measures within PACE projects. El Paso Electric EP, I assume that's what this is. Yes, the nature of a PACE project is it's probably going to also qualify for utility incentives, or if a project is seeking utility incentives, maybe it's a good PACE candidate. The two can be combined. They're totally separate sources of funding. One is private capital, one is utility dollars. The same thing with any sort of government, grants or things like that. I mentioned the USDA combination with utility incentives with PACE. That's really kind of a perfect leverage, taking advantage of everything that's available. So with that, I think we've got all of our questions answered, and my contact information is there. If you have any specific questions, don't hesitate to shoot me an email. Happy to circle back with you and respond. And with that, we will end today's webinar a few minutes early and give you 15 minutes of your afternoon back. We thank you for joining us, and please attend our next T5 and follow us on the website. Thank you.